Yeah, okay.
If you don't stop talking about that. Okay, so this is the thing with Black women. You know, we'll be like focused on something that don't even matter.
It does.
That nobody's noticing.
And then we bring it up, and people are like, "Oh, I didn't notice that till you said something about it."
I didn't see it until you named it.
Oh Lord. Okay, so I'm sharing this. I'm trying to think of a category. I think I might have one. Because you know we gotta play my game, but I gotta share this first.
Okay. Thandi, we always see your eyes. Could you fix your camera?
So we can see the rest of your lovely face.
I be having issues, yo. Problems. What was me having problems? Then I got to move over here because my name is cutting my face.
Yeah.
How y'all doing? I ain't talked to y'all in a minute.
I know.
Hey.
Bye. Okay, so y'all ready? Okay. Same game as always. Let me get my timer ready. I just thought of one category right here in this moment. And I need y'all to be cooperative this time, okay? So the first person that starts talking, that's the person that gets to go. And you got to name 5 things in 10 seconds. I'm going to give you a category. No ums, uhs, ahs. And I'm expecting my English professor to not have any of those filler words, okay? So the category is names for African spiritual traditions. Names for African spiritual traditions.
Ifa, Ewe. I'm going to say Black Christianity and Hoodoo.
Okay. That was good. Okay. Yay, Estee.
Go, Estee.
Yay.
One more time. Okay, let's see. You're gonna name 5 deities, 5 African deities.
Legba, Mommy Water, and Ahalu.
I didn't get to put no timer on. I didn't get to finish.
Next.
I'm trying to think of another category. I figured I'm gonna have to change the game. I had some pictures. I said I was gonna put some pictures up and be like, what is this?
Not pitch.
A chicken.
That's a pop quiz.
All right, cool. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh Lord, can y'all hear my they cut my lawn?
Yeah.
Y'all can hear that? Okay. It's loud. They doing the little thing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am a licensed psychologist and the executive director at A Healing Paradigm. We are based in Muskogee territory, which is also known as Atlanta, Georgia. I am here with my colleagues. Right up to my left is going to be my sister, Professor Antoinette Waithe. She is an anthropologist. She is also the owner of Grand Tressa Hair Products. Hey, Sister Antoinette.
Hi.
You know, she got 50 million names, so she could Antoinette, Nozibele, you name it, she got a different name for it. Right next to her is my colleague, Professor Corrie Claiborne. I always mess up her name and say Claiborne, and I'm going to say it right today. Dr. Corrie Claiborne, who is Associate Professor of Literature at Morehouse College. What's up, Doc?
Howdy.
And then right after her is our sister that keeps us straight, because she's a social commentator, author, and a journalist, Sister Thandisizwe Chimurenga. What's up, Sister Thandi in California?
Hey, soon to be Dr. Thandisizwe Chimurenga in about 5 years. No, I'm just playing.
No, absolutely not.
I'm claiming it.
Okay, so you and I are from the same neck of the woods. What territory is that? Do you know what indigenous people part. So okay, that's our homework. Because I said I was on the
because I've seen it and I didn't memorize it. I've seen it because people refer to it, and you know we gonna get that. The first thing came to mind was Ohlone, but that's Northern California.
We gonna get that. We're gonna get that. So we're gonna know where. No, we're gonna know that. We're gonna figure that out. My sister Estee, Nena Dillard, who is also known by Mawasi, Osundayo. No, Okun. Is it Okundayo?
Okunsade.
And Okundaye. She got 50 million names. 2. She is a sexologist, a queer sexologist, a reverend, and a priestess of Ifa and Olokun. And she is here to hang out with us. And she is up in Cherokee territory. What's up, sis?
Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, family.
Cherokee territory, where you at?
North end of Atlanta.
So where you at? Where is you? Okay. North end of Atlanta. All right.
Yes. On the north side.
And you know, that could be the next game that you play to see how many names we have, and whoever has the most wins.
That's a good one too. But I'm from
Yeah,
Macon,
I already lost
which
that
is
game.
also Cherokee territory.
Oh, you're from Cherokee territory. Okay. Well, there you go. See?
Yep.
There's a thing, there's a link that I will put up. I need to find, I think I have it in my bookmarks where sister showed me. It's a website where you can go in and you can literally put in your address and you can find out what is the original territory, First Nations territory that you're in. Okay. So I like to kind of just name that, just remind myself to just name that every single time I show up. Just as a reminder for myself. But anyway, okay, so we're gonna shift and jump into this whole conversation about African spirituality and the way that media has demonized it over the years. I'm just wondering, for all of you, when you grew up, when you saw any kind of reference to voodoo or anything that had to do with Africa and spiritual systems, what kind of images did you see?
Oh God. Mainly the ones that I remember were always around voodoo, and they were always around fetishes where they would have like a doll come to life, or they would have someone possessed. Those are some of the earliest memories that I have.
I don't have any memories of African spirituality. What I do have are memories of, if it wasn't Christianity or Christ or Jesus, it was of the devil.
Yeah.
It was evil. But at the same time, there was an acknowledgement that it existed. Like I would hear people talk about a haint. Like, what's a haint? Right? And I remember I actually heard my mother mention one time that she went to a woman once as a youth. She may have been a teenager, young woman. Somebody had put something on her, but she never talked about going back afterwards or delving more into that. She just went on and, lived her life as a Christian woman. But just the fact that it existed, that people acknowledged its existence, I thought was interesting at the time.
So I remember being around all kinds of things, but it always being demonized in a very kind of explicit way. But I'm from Macon, Georgia, so it was all kind of stuff going on. And even I love you talking about Haints, Tiny, because as a child they used to always laugh at me and be like, Nena like to hang out with the Haints because I would be up all time tonight early. Why? Because I'm an Egungun person. So I'm like, so that it's true. They was telling the truth, but I thought that was negative or evil, or I'd be like, I don't know why I be waking up like this. I just feel something. I feel like I should walk around the house. I also think about things like I had an uncle who everybody said was crazy, who would make like herbal mixes, and people would come from all over to purchase them. And they would talk about how crazy he was, and he would be cooking stuff up and you could smell it. He would be outside sometimes doing it over a fire on the stove. And I'm like, dang, why ain't anybody got a suggested recipe? You know what I'm saying? Because he's transitioned now. And I think about too on my dad's side of the family, and for my Georgia family, we had people that the family literally would fear. Like I remember I had an aunt who gave me a doll that my parents wouldn't let me get rid of because they were sure she had put something in it. And I literally like left and went to college with that doll, and I was like, I don't even like this doll, you know. But they're like, you can't, you gotta keep it, you know. but at the same time, was like, don't go to her house. I never spent time with this aunt because of the kinds of work that she did, you know. So we was gonna be Jesus, and but there was still a regard for it as much as it was hated. It was very interesting.
And I think the difference between so my family, very Christian, United Methodist. So, but they never talked about voodoo, hoodoo. Like that wasn't even a word that they acknowledged, right? Like, so there was root, right? You could do root, you could do all this other kind of stuff, but it wasn't, I mean, everybody in church did that, right? Like, so it wasn't a separation, meaning that, oh, if you did this, you were about the devil. And so I always find, because I would ask my grandmother about, you know, whatever it is, right? Like, oh, I want this boy to like me. And I was like, well, Grandma, how did I get him to like me? She was like, well, you can, you know, I forgot what the recipe was, you know, get some of his hair, do something with some grass, tied up, full moon, whatever. But she would be like, well, you could do that. But understand, you know, that's going to come with some consequences. So whatever you do to somebody comes back to you 3 times, right? And so I was like, all right, well, my grandma know that. She be singing at church, she go, whatever. She must have asked Jesus about it. So it never occurred to me that that was something else, right? Like she would always acknowledge things. She would tell me stories about, you know, the dead were never dead, right? Like that was not a part of anything that I believed. And I didn't know that was a separate tradition. I just thought that that is what all Black people believed. I thought all Black people thought, you know, like you talk about being a haint. So my grandma used to call me a plat eye. A plat eye, you know, the Congo tradition are like the little spirits that come out the water with real big eyes. And they always awake at night. Some people said they had an eye in the middle of the forehead, so they had like 3 eyes. And she would be like, oh, girl, you're just a plat eye child. A plat eye. And I did not know until later. I was like, oh, that's like a little gremlin. Like you talk about, you know, I was like, that's not nice. Like they don't look good. Like that's like a little hate people scared of. That when you see them on the road at night, you know you gotta run. Like I didn't understand. So it was like all of these traditions that they kept alive. They didn't sort of say, oh well, this is what this is, that is what that is. However, you know, they were very careful with the tongue. So whatever you say. So I know I couldn't even talk about the devil. I couldn't say, like, I always thought about, you know, I saw Little Nas X and I didn't see his whole video, but where, I don't know, he was pole dancing on the devil or something like that. And I thought about my grandmother. I was like, well, if you say the devil's name, if you call him, he gonna come now. So I was like, woo, you know what I'm gonna do? I was like, I'm not saying I put the judgment on him, but I do know you call his name, he gonna come. So I was like, you don't play with that. You don't make no funny video. You don't dress as the devil as Halloween. Like all of that stuff, I was very clear that you didn't do.
And I think I misheard the question because I thought you were talking about our first experiences with it in the media. Because my first experience in the media is different from the experience I had in my home. Pretty similar to everyone else growing up in the South. Spirits and roots, all of that stuff was just really ingrained in how we grew up. And it governed our day-to-day action. Like you couldn't hang your underwear out on the line. You know, if you wanted somebody to come by or, you know, you or don't want somebody to come by, you put salt. So it's all these things that were normalized by my grandmother and my aunts. Even the shrines that they had was normalized, right? So it's just something, like you said, Corrie, it's just something that you knew growing up. It was just something that you do. And even talking to the dead, and I didn't find out in the tradition that I practice that they have this whole amagasi. And the whole amagasi is one who specifically speaks with the dead. Because when my husband came and he met my family, my aunt was like, oh yeah, I saw Poochie last night and he said this, he said that. And he said, I thought Poochie was dead. And we was like, he is. And so he was like, okay. So, you know, it was normalized that things like that happen. So.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I was thinking of the media, but I liked how the question got expanded, because all I saw in the media was you hear the term voodoo and the dolls with the pins in it. That's all I would see, is that kind of stuff. And at first I was going to say I didn't have any kind of interactions with African spiritual traditions when I was growing up, but that's not true. As I listened to you all, what I realized is, so I wasn't raised religious, but my father's family was Catholic. My mother's family was Methodist. And there were things that were just normalized, but it just wasn't called spirituality. So like, for example, my grandfather always talked about ancestors. And like, if you said like anything, he talked about people that were dead. He didn't call them ancestors, but he constantly talked about people that were dead. And he always, by the time I was in high school, like I had this ability and I didn't understand it. So I would tell him that when somebody was going to come by, like somebody hadn't been by in a long time, and I would get a thought of that person and I would say, hey, such and such is going to come by. And then after a while, because I did it so consistently, he would say, yeah, she can do that. And they just acted like it was normal. I was sitting up here like, why do I know that people are coming? And I would hear like my grandparents say stuff about like ESP. Like I heard the word ESP, but nobody had a conversation with me about it. My grandmother on my other side, my mother's mother would talk about my father having a root put on him. And she would be very adamant. Like I can see her to this day. My grandmother would look at me and she said, that's not your father. I need you to understand that is not your father. And I was 16, so I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. But they would just say these things like it was just completely normal.
Yeah, and it seemed like anything evil was really about white people. We were talking about this earlier, and as I think about it, you know, the only things that I saw, like The Omen and all that, you know, all those whatever, The Exorcist, which actually my sister watched and got sick. And that's because my grandma told us not to watch that, but we decided we're gonna do it anyway. So we were like, oh, see, that's what you that's what you get. Try to watch us inviting the devil in, he gonna come. So I was like, see, we messed around. So it seemed like, you know, evil or evil intent or anything that was a process of magic you did where you brought evil in was only the provenance of white people. So there was like nothing that Black people could do, really. Even if they put a root on somebody, it was never like, oh, she dabbling in something or that's evil. There's like, oh, well, you know, that's what happened. You should not have that woman do your hair. So you know, whatever it is.
On a day.
But it wasn't like the person was outcast in the community. It wasn't like, oh, well, we ain't gonna talk to her because this is what she does. But white people, like my grandmother was like, a white person cannot step foot on my property because I don't know what they're bringing with them. Not only will they be trouble, right, in all kinds of ways, but they might be bringing like spirit, right, on this property, and I'm not going to allow it. So, I mean, she didn't even have to say it, but she was just like, no.
And you know, so, that is so interesting because I know years ago I read about the Omen, right? No, not The Omen, The Exorcist. And they said that one of the reasons why The Exorcist was so terrifying to people, that if you remember in the beginning, I've never seen The Exorcist because Corrie, like your grandma said, I don't want to invite that in. And I'm too receptive. I can't. You know, I tried, but I can't. So they said, but one of the reasons that made The Exorcist so terrifying in the very beginning scene, if people have seen it can remember this, they were at an archaeological site in some place like Egypt, and they're digging up something in the archaeological sites. And so you see Arabs in the background, but the music sounds a little African in its beat. And when they pick something up, the statue that they pick up is something that you will probably find in Africa. Now, that is never addressed again in the whole Exorcist. They don't talk about somebody touched the statue and the statue possesses the girl, or any of those types of things. And in this essay that I read, they said that was set the tone for the Exorcist. Just that little excerpt with the drumming, with the others in the background, and with the statue, and that became terrifying. So, and I think that's interesting because from an anthropological point of view, or a sociological point of view, what is the purpose of horror, right? So when European people do horror, the purpose of it is to kind of like reconcile their fear of the other, right? So they're saying, okay, this person is not like me, and I understand who I am and what I am based on what I'm not. And I'm dealing with all these fears based on what I'm not. So for example, if you look at the werewolf in horror, the werewolf can represent good versus evil, but it can also represent the evil that lives within from their perspective. And we're talking about European perspective and ideology for the most part, because they're the ones who, these archetypes fit into. So a werewolf would mean the battle versus good within evil within a person's self. A vampire is interesting because vampire starts off as the monstrous others. Because you remember when vampires were from Transylvania and they had all this stuff like that, then vampires became the monstrous, person within themselves. And then the vampire became the ideal. Because when they talk about vampires now, vampires are sexy, they're rich, they all this other type of stuff. So the purpose of horror is to, I know that's, hey, I don't write it, I'm just saying what you say. So the purpose of horror is to deal with the others. And one of the main ways that they deal with horror is based on African people is the zombie, because the zombie is the first otherworld monster to come into existence, because everything else is European of origin. So I think it's interesting that you would bring the Exorcist up, Corrie.
So years ago, I read this article in Essence, and I need to go back and find it. This is, I don't know how many years ago. And they were talking about, there was going to be a movie of Toussaint produced. And they had pulled out a part of a French general's or someone in the French army's journal. And there was this piece in there where he was writing two things that I thought were interesting. He wrote about these pots that the Haitian warriors the Africans would leave. And then the French soldiers would look in the pots and then they would fall in and disappear. So he said that, one thing. The other thing that he said, of course, I knew that was going to make you laugh. And this is in his journal. So he's talking about his experiences as he was writing. The other thing that he talked about, which I thought was really interesting, is he talked about that the French would shoot the Africans. And this is mostly men, because you remember on the island of Haiti, they were predominantly enslaving men. And he said they would shoot the Africans and the bullets wouldn't work. He said they just kept coming and coming and coming. And I thought that was really interesting, because to me, when I looked at that and that journal piece, and they were talking about that was where you started getting these ideas of voodoo and African spirituality being evil, because you saw these Haitian folks, they weren't Haitian at the time, these African people that were being enslaved, but they had already been through their initiatory rites, because they were getting people that were older and older and older. And so they were using this power that they had, this ashe that they had, to fight the French. And the French,
that is why it was demonized.
Yes.
That is why it was condemned, because it worked.
Mm-hmm. And even the term zombie, and I don't know if this is true, but I've seen this said, because it comes from the Kikongo. Like, if you know, high God is zombie, Nzambi, right? And so they heard people saying zombie, and they're like, they put the spirit. So basically, God is just the great spirit. So when they would talk about zombie, they would talk about in embodying the spirit of whatever. And so they took that to mean, and I'm not saying that there is not a process of zombification. We could talk about how that happens, all this other kind of stuff. But initially, I think when the French heard it, they were just like, oh, these are monsters. Like they're creating this something. This is not unworldly. And I think in the mythology and in the media and in movies, they took the name zombie and they made it evil. They made it a monster, where it
Absolutely.
is like the power that Black people had. And they couldn't explain it other than, oh, these evil monsters. Like, how could you not, how could you avoid bullets, right? Like, how could you do this unless you were something else other than human? So.
And they said the first recorded incidence of zombie was, I think William Seaboard wrote a book in 1929 called The Magic Island. And then, so they talked about, was it 1929, 1829? I don't know. I can't remember. It's probably
100-year difference, girl.
Yeah, I'm not a historian. That's why we need Dr. McCray. I don't know.
Shout out Kenja. Be with us today.
Shout out Dr. McCray. Feel better soon. So I think it was 1929. So he wrote the book and talked about zombies, right? And people were like, really, oh my God, because he talked about, he made Haiti seem like this magical place. And then some people took the book, The Magic Island, and made a movie in 1932 called White Zombie. And so the whole thing, and this is what made it so terrifying, because you had these colonialists living in Haiti, and just like the Haitian Revolution, they rose up and they said, we're not going to take this stuff anymore. They blow a powder in their face, aka serpent and a rainbow, and turn these white people to zombies. So when they talk about it, they say in the beginning, the fear of zombies was being turned into a zombie. If you look at film history. So all the films earlier was, oh my God, I don't want to be a zombie, because that represented people who were less in power, you know, usurping those people in power. And then, you know, the fear of them, you know, getting done to them what they've done to other people. So that's what the zombie really represents. And then later it's become being killed by zombies and, you know, being killed by the people you oppressed.
And I think the apocalypse.
Yeah, and Zorna Hurston, you can Google this. She has, she claims to be the first person who took a picture of a woman who like this living zombie that she met on the road. Like there's literally a picture, and she was saying that, you know, it was literally some plants that some formulation that people bought from Africa that kind of made you the living dead. And so she says that this man turned his wife into a zombie so he could marry somebody else. So she takes a picture of, takes a picture of her, and then, but she's like, you know, this is my, you know, first documentation of this. So, you know, I know Ife wants to talk about Zorna Hurston, but she did do, I think, very necessary work to try to separate out how the sort of culture, especially Haitian culture, got sort of mistakenly called "quote unquote" evil. So
I think the other. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'll remember.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I think it's the opposite part too, though, to talk about our topic dealing with media, right? In these representations, it's not just the demonizing of these Black images, Black languages. It's also the deifying of whiteness when it comes to spirituality. And so I think that part is important to name too, because I mean, if you just think about all of the imagery that we see of holiness and of being well, and you know, even the contradiction that you talk about in The Exorcist, because the main subject is this innocent white girl, right? And so I think all of that part too is like, we have all of these Bible movies that I grew up watching. These people ain't white. It's no white people there. They're not white people, you know. Like, we're not even talking about a part of the world where white people are, you know. But Moses and Joseph and the
Charlton
Egyptians,
Heston.
like none of the
Charlton Heston would call Moses till the day he died. Okay, there go Moses, y'all, talking about gun control.
I mean, and it's really kind of, I mean, the type of manipulation it takes to pull that off is really it's awing for me, because it's very logical. You know what I'm saying? Like, if Jesus hid in Egypt so that he wouldn't be found, he probably looked like Africans. You know what I'm saying? You know, so I think that part too is very, very important, because it contributes to this narrative of how we see and understand what we see. So when we see these images, when we see images that are attributed to spirituality, then we automatically have these associations about dark and light. I think that contributes as well. And I think what we talked about earlier around language is a way that our own covert ability to harness our ashe has furthered these kinds of media images, because we don't name things. We don't have this kind of explicit nature around holding our spiritual practices in regard. And it's not because we don't regard them. It's just because of the ways that we had to survive. But I think those things then kind of create this larger thread that can contribute to the harmful meta-narrative.
And I think going along with that is thinking about overall, like, what's the goal of media? And we know the goal of the media. Okay, here's the thing. All right. I was on a roll. The goal of media is not just this kind of just passive entertainment. It is designed for a particular purpose. And so when we think about stuff like, I've never seen The Exorcist, I don't do scary movies, it does something to my spirit, and it's always been that way. And I was looking at Venicia made a comment that she saw The Exorcist when she was 6. Went home, she was running home, cut her hand, and she said the scar is still there. And so I think that we have to remember that there's something that's being done. It's a demonization of us, and like you said, in this elevation of whiteness, an elevation of white supremacy. And to the point when we see stuff, we're not necessarily making connections that are to our benefit. So let me give you an example. So we just talked about the zombies, right? As soon as you said that, Kuumba, I started thinking about, I went back to Malidoma Some's book, which is like about 20 years old now, of Water and the Spirit. And if you remember in Malidoma's book, he talked about his grandfather dying, and his grandfather dying in the Western hospital. And he was dead. His father was a Christian, but his father knew that his grandfather had to be appropriately buried with the appropriate rites. How did they get that body home? Do y'all remember what it did?
I don't remember.
His father, Malatoma's father, took some kind of herb, some kind of something natural. I don't know what it was. He put it in his grandfather's dead hand. His grandfather's body got up and walked home. Go back and look at it. It's in there. So that's an early sign, or I wouldn't say early. It's a contemporary idea of this idea of zombies that is talked about, and it's not demonized. And so it's something that goes over us, and like we forget it. So this idea of zombie, being a zombie and the dead moving is not anything that's new to African people.
And then that's what the whole thing, Wade Davis took that whole concept. He was an ethnobiologist, right? And he was the one that they based the movie Serpent and the Rainbow on. So that same thing that Malidoma Some described as something as amazing and beautiful and very necessary for, you know, respecting the dead, Wade Davis took it somewhere else. And the people who made Serpent and the Rainbow sensationalized it. And unfortunately, a lot of people's ideas with Africa, you know, with zombies is based in that movie. And that's how they think zombies are made.
But they don't think about the beauty of what Malidoma is presenting and his grandfather walking back home to go be buried. That's beautiful.
But also,
that would never come into the
but
equation.
a simple thing like a wake, you know, I understood the reason why you go and you sit and you witness is because you want to see if the body wakes up. That's literally why they do that, right? And I knew that. Like, they're just like, you go witness and you have a wake. But I was like, well, why is it called that? Because you're literally trying to see if the body is going to quote unquote stay dead. Now, death and what all this is up. Is the body going to get up? Is it how long and they usually, because for people, you know, it could be the like 2 nights, right? That you were there. People bring food, they make it a whole kind of thing. And I was like, Black people, we will carry on traditions and we will not ask why. We won't ask, you know, has it ever happened? And asking my grandmother, she's like, yeah, there are people who just got up. And I was like, well, what you do? Like, I would be like, I would have ran right out. She was like, no, why would you run? Right? You know who that is, right? Like, if they get up, they got something else to do. Or, you know, that is like, you know, they're on some other assignment. Like, they got to walk to the grave, like, whatever it is. They might have something to do. So you can't bury them too soon because they might have like an assignment. I was like, okay. But she just kept it moving. It wasn't like, oh, that's scary. You know,
this gets classified as African spirituality, but like you said, it's just normalized. It's part of who we are. It's part of our culture. It's what we do. You know, I just had a thought actually when you talking about this. A good sister friend of mine in Alabama, her son, who, you know, I'm friends with the mother and the son. He was killed several years ago on his way home from work. And I remember her saying how she had a dream that night that he came in and was standing over her. And that's why she thought he was in the bed. And so when she gets up the next morning, he's not there. She's like, well, where is he? I got to find him. It's like his spirit came home or alerted her to something that was going on. And so we have these instances where, the body got up and did such and such, but we also have these dreams. They come to us in dreams to let us know X, Y, and Z is happening, or has happened, or is about to happen. It can be it can be a dream, or it can be in real life. I've heard of accounts in Africa and Nigeria where a person is raised maybe 3 days after they pass, find out final instructions, final words or what have you, and then, you know, they go on about their business, or they're sent on about their business. And it's like it's something that's normal over there, but we get over here. That's the other thing too about when you talk about horror. You know, my go-to now is Lovecraft Country. Because horror for Black people is different from horror for white people, right? The horror for Black folks is America and white folks. That's our horror story.
There you go.
But I was raised at that television generation, just enamored by TV. Well, grew up watching TV all the time. And as I began to get conscious in my late, I guess my middle teens, I was like, well, wait a minute. How come, talking about horror movies, why is it that everything is out to get white people? Everything is out to get white people. Like I said, I grew up on horror movies. Everything in nature is trying to kill or eat white people. There is a horror movie out there for everything. Killer Ants, Killer Bees, The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, Snails, Frogs. You got the Blob from out. Everything is trying to take white people. Why is that?
Tomatoes.
The tomato attack of the killer tomatoes.
But I guess
it's real. Why is everything out to kill white people?
And I think it goes
white people psyche for that.
I think it goes back to what everybody was saying earlier in terms of worldview, right? Right. So if you talk about African worldview is more connected, more holistic, right? Because we see life as a cycle. You know, we know every goodbye ain't gone, every shut eye ain't sleep. And we know that everybody, you know, that it comes out. That's why it's normalized that you can talk to your ancestors. Why, you know, you understand that it's not supernatural. It's just natural. It's normalized, like we talked about, as opposed to European people like Richard Bradley, the Iceman Inheritance. He talks about how the psychology of European people developed based on their harsh climate, right? Yes, and because of the way that if you constantly have to fight for your food, if you have to fight for this, then you're going to have a different relationship with your environment and your surrounding, as opposed to living in a place where it's not necessarily saying that Africa or other places were utopia. Certainly, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it was a different relationship with the environment. So if you're anti-environment, that's why we have all the problems that we have now in terms of things are happening, because it's contradictory. Yeah, it's not it doesn't complement.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about that. If you are from a harsh environment, you see the environment is out to get you and harmful. And so then you create, and you're even in your creative space is going to be hostile. It's going to be trying to hit you. So Tani, like you said, so the horror movies that are created are going to be movies that are going to be attacking. Jello. I haven't even seen. See, I don't see it. I don't see none of that.
The blob ain't nothing but space Jello. It's about to kill white people.
I ain't seen any of that.
No, she didn't say Jello trying to kill white people.
But I think it goes back to mythology. And I think this is a really interesting, you're talking about movies. So, but I think that largely, like just the mythology, and when I say mythology, people always think, I mean, you could talk about Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all that other kind of stuff. Mythology doesn't mean that something is not true, even though, Zeus probably, he didn't exist or whatever. Like you could talk about mythology, but there's stories that the culture is based on. And so if your mythological stories, are about monsters, that says a lot about your culture. So it says about these people in the North felt threatened, all this other kind of stuff. African mythology would be very different. Not to say that there's not people who die or, whatever that happens. I was actually talking to my class about this, about the Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit tales, like the Uncle Remus, when white people tell it, the Uncle Remus stories. I said, you could be mad at the author, Joel Chandler Harris, for packaging these stories in what he called a Black dialect and selling it to white people for entertainment. But, and at the base, it looked like Black people were powerless because Uncle Remus was still a slave telling these stories to little white kids on the plantation. And that's what they like to see. And if you saw Song of the South, he was even singing Zoopity-Doo-Dah with a little bluebird sitting on his shoulder while a slave. And he looked happy. And it seems like it is, oh, how quaint. But at the base of the story is about the trickster figure, the rabbit, who's stuck on the tar baby. It's how he gets out of being on the tar baby, right? That at base, the mythological African folktale was about how you can use the power of your language to get you out of something. And that is a power that shows us having magic. When white people tell it, they have to make it so that we're disempowered. You could be telling a story, but here you are, Uncle Remus, still on the plantation, right? You could talk to the animals, but somehow that's not enough to help you get free, right? Like we use those same things. And so I think, it says more about, like I said, if people go back to, whether we should take Aunt Jemima off the pancakes, I don't really know, right? Like, or Uncle Ben off the box. That's, that's for, another kind of thing. But I was like, if you go back to when you see those people mentioned in stories and you think about what's at the base of it, I don't think we should throw all of that away, right? Like, I think that you shouldn't make that Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox story just about this white man who may or may not appear on a box ice, right? Like, so I think that's the problem.
Okay, so then let me jump in, and I'm probably gonna get blasted. I might have to edit this out or take this video down as I talk about Zora Neale Hurston. So I was a lover of me some Zora Neale Hurston until I started fully reading all of her stuff. And I think it's really interesting because you talk about the difference between like white people telling a story and us telling our own story. And as I read more of Zora Neale Hurston, I started to realize like, hey, she's kind of problematic. And specifically when I read A Mule and Men, she was the whole thing of like voodoo and in New Orleans, it was so problematic because they were talking about killing people, breaking up marriages, just doing all kinds of bad character stuff. And I remember just calling you upset, Corrie, because I was like, what is this? Like, how is it supposed to be good?
But that was what she was interested in. My thing is, you can only, it is not the belief system itself, it is what she was about, right? Like, she was interested in breaking up people's marriages. She was interested in all of this kind of drama. That's why I was telling you, Du Bois was like, you on some nonsense. Like, he kind of told her, like, you gotta be talking about. And then, you know, he was all highfalutin and taught in a top hat and stuff. He had problems himself, but he was kind of like, you know, are you helping Black people? Is this really literature that's going to elevate the race? Because I feel like all you talking about is people sleeping around and, you know, doing all this stuff. However, what I said is, even in that, like I said, she's a very good documentarian, right? Like, even if the reason she gets initiated when she goes to Haiti is just so that she has more material to write about, maybe even if it does not come from a good place in her heart, I think that it is really important, the work that she does, right? And people talk about Barracoon and, you know, just what a record that is. But like, everything that she does, I think, is a record. But personally, she was on some nonsense. So, I mean, and I think that's why she and Langston Hughes fell out, because he was like, you on some nonsense.
Okay, to Zora Neale's defense now. Zora Neale, she was trained under, why am I forgetting his name now? She was trained as an anthropologist under Franz Boas. Thank you. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So when people read Dust Tracks on the Road of Mules and Men, they read, and that's the creativity and the beauty of Zora Neale Hurston, that is that they read it as a story, but it's really an ethnography. So it's not like she's going up there and she's writing stuff about voodoo. She actually talked to people. She actually listened to people, and she actually interviewed people and took what they said and put it in the story form. Now, she didn't do it how a traditional anthropologist has done it, but that's what she did. So it's not like she's pulling this stuff out the air, and it's not like she's making stuff up, because let's be real, there are some people that would get in a tradition because they want a man, they want a woman, they want a baby, they want a job, they want this, they want that, or whatever. Yeah. And let's be real about it. And I think that's one of the struggles and the challenges that people have, that people who practice African traditions struggle with. And that's a different conversation, an honest conversation that we have to have, probably like in private company. But that is something that we really need to talk about. So I say that in Zora Neale's defense. She wasn't just pulling out her thing. She was really doing research.
She wasn't just
but I'm not saying that. So I'm not saying that she was making it up. I think what she was saying, I think you're right. She's an ethnographer, and so she's documenting stuff. But when you read it, she's documenting all negative stuff. There's nothing beautiful about it. So if you read that, I mean, I've been to Vodun ceremonies that are absolutely beautiful and healing and uplifting, and it had nothing to do with trying to kill somebody or break up a marriage. It had to do with a beautiful, powerful experience that is not documented there at all. And I think that's the problem, is because I thought to myself, who is she writing for? And then Corrie reminded me, well, she had this white patron. So she's
that's what I was about to say. And that's what I was about to say. Especially with her funding and who was backing her, she pretty much played with the audience, and more so than anything else, I think that was probably Langston Hughes' really, real, when you get down to it, critique of her, is that she was playing to the audience as opposed to trying to, and he did too. But he did it in a different way. He was more savvy with the way that he did it, and he was much more stealthy. And I guess because of his experience, he can kind of like slip it. And then you have to look at the gender aspect of it. Yeah. A lot of times people are not even talking about that, how they, give him a pass, but not necessarily Zora Neale Hurston. They make excuses for what he has or has not done, but not the women. So again, you have to look at her back, and you have to look at all those things. And all I need to say is that when I read Mules and Men, and when I read Dust Tracks on the Road or Go Tell My Horse, I had a very different understanding of it based on my upbringing with it being normalized. I didn't see it as necessarily negative or evil or problematic. I just saw it as, yeah, some people do this and some people do that. And the people who did this, they're going to pay, like Corrie said earlier, they're going to pay for it eventually.
Right.
You know, so
I was like,
don't do
okay,
that.
you could do that if you want. Right? Like, but, and also, I mean, my biggest problem with Zora Neale Hurston, and like I said, as a writer, she is unmatched. Like, I can literally quote the beginning of Their Eyes Are Watching God from memory, right? Like, I could, my students are like, you really know that by heart? I do, right? Like, so, you know, like a writer unmatched. However, you know, for a long time, she was turning Black people in. I mean, she was with the McCarthys. Like, she was like, you know, Paul Robeson is a communist and you need to watch all this other kind of stuff. And my thing is this, it could have been because she was always polemical. She was trying to get people to talk. However, yeah, you know, like in the way that she did it, especially when she lived in Harlem, is that you can't go out talking about, and this is partly why she ends up going back to Florida, besides the fact that she's broke, but also she made enemies like in the Black community, right? The Black community that she wrote about. And it made it very difficult because she would say stuff like, you know, like the Savoy, all these places that were segregated, you know, like, why Black people need to go in the front door? We should go in the back. And people are like, you know, what? Like, you know, why would you say that, right? Like, even if you really felt like that, why would you say, yeah, you're fine with Black people who are providing all these entertainment for white people going in the back door? And that's the way it should be. Y'all should always have to go in the back. You know, that doesn't, even if you love Black culture, you want it to remain separate, that doesn't sort of jive, right? So I think that she had a lot of, like, you ain't gonna talk about Paul Robeson in any kind of way. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's just me. You know, just personal issues that I think prevent her, and it might have been on purpose. Like I said, she might have been just doing it to get more press, and so people would talk about her in a certain way. But it reads to me as she was courting white people, like she was trying to be white people's Negro.
Go ahead, Estee, and then I'm gonna read something from her book. Go ahead.
I'm going in a different direction because I'm watching the time. You go first.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so now let me just say this really quick. So, like at the back of A Mules and Men, she's got recipes to kill and harm, to make a man come home, to make people love you, and to break up a love affair. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm like, okay, so why is that? Why is that what you got?
You can find something similar in Sacred Woman, I will argue. I mean, basically it's repackaged as something else. But if you really look at it, the ultimate thing is how to bring a man to you. Make sure that you have your Oshun going. Make sure that your body is going this way, that you have this cool healing energy so you can bring your king to you. Really, just to say, you know, not like I am the president of the Zora Neale Hurston fan club, right? I can't quote it like Corrie. You know, I'm not that savvy. I can't analyze it like I know Estee has probably done, or just like catalog it like, you know, Thandisizwe, or look at that craziness that you pointed out, Ife. But what I can say is that women are complex, right? We're complex. And I think that when we talk about things of that nature, we have to account for the complexity of not only her culture, her environment, her history, her upbringing, her race, gender, and class would make her act and do these things for her. And just try to examine it a little bit more, not necessarily give her a pass, but examine it a little bit more and give her some of the grace that we would give other people. Because Sidney Poitier was all up there talking about Paul Robeson. He was the main one, just like, you know, but people still up there talking about Sidney Poitier was a great actor.
Right.
He is a great actor, but you know what I'm saying.
Estee, you got the last comment because we're at the end of our time.
Okay, I should have jumped in earlier because I got like 3 things. So I'm gonna go. But because the topic is still, just images in media, right, around African spirituality, and so I definitely wanted to get to like lemonade, and I feel like Nozibele just kind of touched on this because I think some of that is even problematic. Ojelade, of course, I love Oshun personally, but I do think some of the ways that we have trended African spirituality and the way that Black folks are allowing it to be, further perpetuated in media as this kind of, all you got to do is just, wear yellow and, let your love come out, where there's so much complexity and skill and wisdom and training required to be able to appropriately navigate working with some of these African spiritual energies. And I just really think that part needs to be said. I think a caveat to that also is, some of that stuff is, like I'm not a Sacred Woman fan. So I think if you make it pretty or if you go after somebody's partner, it's still, I think what are we getting at? Are we really seeking to connect with the ancient work that is at the core of what African spirituality is about in all of these myriad ways that we see it manifested across the diaspora? So I think that's one thing. The second thing that I wanted to say to that kind of same point around media is similar to what Corrie already said about Lil Nas X and some of the other ways that we are seeing people be intentionally subversive, which I actually think is great, particularly for queer folks, because it's giving us an avenue to be able to navigate how we create these openings, which is the kind of work we're already doing, particularly because African spirituality doesn't make a lot of inroads for queer folks in overt ways in Western cultures, because that's not necessarily true, most often not in ancient cultures, but in our Western context. So I think that part needs to be named too as a part of this kind of greater conversation around African spirituality and media. And the other piece, the third thing that I was just gonna kind of speak to quickly is I also think it's important that we think about how there's still theological work and theoretical work that's happening when we see and observe spirituality, right? And I think often what happens is indigenous and ancient practices are seen as having a particular utility, whereas Western and white practices are seen as just being sacred and honorable. And I think that dichotomy is what we often are in conversation with. And it's a theoretical dichotomy that we need to also acknowledge, right? So that's why we can get into it, hoodoo is really about, can you get your sexual power to, get you a house, right? Where because it's being minimalized through utility. Whereas if we're thinking about white culture, if we're thinking about whatever the white spiritual tradition right now, it tends to be Christianity in that particular iteration, because that's not Christianity in its original form. Let me say that. But Jesus wasn't a Christian. But
Amen.
But I think, but that is expected to just be honored and to just be regarded. And the theoretical undertone is that it is to be handled that way. Whereas theoretically and theologically, when we're looking at African spiritual traditions, the question is more about utility and what does it do? So then we engage it from that same point of entry. How can I then get it to do? You see what I'm saying? Which is where I think we get down a problematic road, because sometimes you do need your man to come home, and that in and of itself is not harmful. If first of all, if it's your man, you know what I'm saying? Like there's some information. We need some context. You know what I'm saying? but
where you at? Where you at?
You know what I'm saying? And if we're enslaved, you know what I mean? Or if you are having some kind of mental health experience experience, or if you know what I mean, like there are all kinds of ways that it could be very real and practical and healthy to say, let me make sure that I am in communication with the spiritual realm, that I align my partner to be able to have an open road back home. So I just wanted to kind of make those kind of three very large statements.
No, I love that you said that. I love you brought in the theological piece, because like you took it to a whole new level. I did want to make a comment. I know that we're out of time. Y'all got a few minutes, because I feel like we can't just leave this right here. I want to make a comment about and Corrie and I, years ago when Lemonade came out, Corrie invited me with the group of women. We sat and we watched Lemonade, and I love Lemonade. And people were excited, and everybody was talking about this perpetuation of Oshun, which is one of the deities I'm initiated to. And they were just like, oh yeah, this is she's perpetuating. I mean, she's like, basically, this is the symbolism of Oshun. And I was like, no, it's not. And then everybody was arguing me down, and I was like, no, it's not. It's not.
We were arguing. It was like clear we just didn't know. We were like, oh, well, this is what we thought it was. Okay, please explain, right?
I mean, to me, like water, and I do know, like having read, I know that was kind of like one of the goals, but I think that we need to be able to understand that African spirituality is not something that you get out of Crack-a-Jack box.
Right.
There are serious scientific underpinnings of a spiritual system. Is a science, and so you can't just be like slap on a yellow dress. I love me some Beyonce. Slapping on a yellow dress and being in some water and then walking down the street breaking some windows is not sufficient to say that we are perpetuating Oshun. It does not work that way. I do think
is it saying you're propitiating Oshun? Or is this a
pimping?
What's the word I'm looking for? Not pimping, not propitiating. The word I'm not sure.
Venerate?
No, not venerate. Not even that. It's like a presentation of an aspect. Because again, if you're talking about African spiritual systems and the science that you're talking about and the training and the discipline, that's going to come smack up against the Christianity that says if it ain't Christian, if it ain't Jesus, it's of the devil.
And right? I get that. And so I think what we have to figure out is it sufficient to put on yellow face?
It's like an introduction of aspects. Like, for example, again, everything is that dichotomy of it's Christian or it's Satan. Whereas African people don't have a concept of Satan. We also have the concept of the creator and what I like to call the creator's helpers, these other deities or orishas or loas or abosun, who have particular areas that are their specialty. That gets totally lost, even in mainstream media, because I was just thinking about some of the other movies that I've checked out. Again, it's always Christian. It's always God and the devil. There is no in between. There's God and the devil. Whether you're talking about The Omen, whether you're talking about The Exorcist, whether you're talking about Van Helsing, the Catholic Church is behind trying to root out all of this evil, which is of the devil. If it's I forgot the one with Schwarzenegger. And it was like the millennium was coming up. I forgot the name of the movie. I know you don't know. But it was like this movie came out in 1999 about how Satan was going to walk the earth and needed to find a mortal woman to impregnate. And again, it's Catholic Church. Even Rosemary's Baby. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it's either Christian, it's either God or the devil. There is no in between. And that's not our reality. So and I think we introduce these aspects, when we see these an introduction of aspects of our tradition, I'm an initiative of a system also. I can tell you that's not X, Y, and Z. But the fact that somebody, I guess I like the idea of it being snuck in, like it's being introduced or reintroduced.
What I'm concerned about is though I'm going to use this word, the bastardization of things. To the point where it becomes problematic, where simply the idea of Oshun becomes a yellow revealing dress, which Oshun is like, she's all about like her sexiness. I'm not gonna front on that. And some water. And then this idea that Oshun is represented when your man cheats on you, that you go and you smash out all these windows. There are two aspects of Oshun. Let's be clear. There are two aspects. I mean, there's several aspects. What I'm saying in terms of like how she deals with conflict, there are old dudes that talk about Oshun. Everybody else is trying to go to war. Oshun ain't trying to
dancing and playing.
She don't care.
Yeah, she's playing the shaker race. She ain't trying to fight. There's also dudes of Oshun where you mess with her, she gonna pull out a sword out of her vagina and cut your head off. That's
good place to keep it.
Ways of looking at her.
Yeah, that might be a bit.
She has her own machete. Listen,
but I think you have to go back to what happened before this, because remember, all the talk was that Beyonce and Jay-Z were in the Illuminati, right? So that they were that all these people were worshiping the devil, and so I think in some way she doesn't delve deeply into it, but she is questioning, you know, I mean, because she kind of says, you know, this is so ridiculous, like, yeah, I'm doing this, but then I think she's playing with this, right? Like that she starts asking Black people, especially, is this evil? Is it, if you do this, is this bad? Is this a devil? Is this Because I think that she wants us to look at those problems. I mean, and her mom is from Louisiana. They're from Louisiana. They don't have that separation, to me, of Christianity and root work and all that, because that stuff is all together, right? And I think that she's really trying to problematize all of this all these people who say, well, what she's doing is she's worshiping the devil. And I actually had a thing with my students about this, because I was like, you mean to tell me she's worshiping the devil, making blood sacrifices, and she still got to work out to lose weight? Like, at some level, I feel like something is wrong. Or you doing all this, but yet you still didn't stop your husband from cheating on you. So why worship the devil? Like, it don't make any sense. Like, I was like, you're just, you know, what y'all try to attribute to something else. I think that, and then I think that in the rest of Lemonade is showing how she was going through it, right? Like how she, you know, talking about her father who was cheating on her mother, the daddy lessons, the whatever, you know, she's sad, they build the sandcastles. So by the time she gets back, you realize it is not about, oh, she can, you know, she's worshiping something else. It is about, these are all parts of her cultural practice that allow her to heal at the end. Because at the end, you know, they all sitting there in the trees and, you know, doing whatever. So anyway.
Yeah,
I think it's go ahead, Estee.
I actually think the larger overtone in Lemonade is mostly Egungun. It's very ancestral.
It is.
And I think she's very intentional about that. And that seems to be the major thing that she wants to communicate to me as an observer. Because when you get as recent as Black is King and songs like Black Parade, she's explicit then about Oshun. And she tells you what she think of what she's doing. You know what I mean? She talks about the beehive and like it's in the lyrics. So I don't think there's a whole lot of question that we really are kind of watching an artist evolve in her self-knowledge and how that connects to her embodiment of her spirituality and how her own personal power gets motivated through these spiritual mediums, right? But I think Lemonade is really more about ancestral stuff. And she even talks about, you know, how these lessons and things she was taught by our grandmothers and ancestors are what helped her to move and make some of the decisions she made around her family and her partnership. So I think it's all there. I don't think Lemonade is actually one of my favorite albums because I mean, watch it and experience it the first time. It was so, the ancestral energy of it was so overwhelming for me that it's palpable, right? But I think what I'm trying to speak to is how for those of us that have been disconnected and may not have the same access points, right? That Beyonce herself or others of us might have. You know what I'm saying? And my cousins, who my folks from the Gulf, you know what I'm saying? So my cousins who only have a church and don't know any difference than what they have is, well, she was wearing yellow, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that's the place where we have to name that if all you got is Amazon and access to Sacred Woman, then how do we then take those points of access and create inroads for ourselves that are honorable, that are holistic, that are well informed, and that give us a clear picture of what it is that we're engaging with and what it is that we're calling on and out of.
And I think that goes back to the responsibility of a person, because I think that if we all go back to our spiritual journeys, we had inroads, right? But we didn't stop there. So when you look at the society and you look at the culture and you look at how people even have these access points, will determine how, where, when, and how far they will go, I think. And just like we were talking about Zora Neale Hurston being problematic and a complex woman, I say the same for Beyonce. You know, to me, Beyonce is problematic, but she's a complicated woman. Ooh. And I appreciate and I love. Oh, see, look, Tiny just left. She was like, I ain't hearing this nonsense. I ain't taking that nonsense. You're going too far, Nozibele. You're going too far. But, you know, like I said, I think in some senses that she is problematic. But the way that I feel about Oshun, you know, when we talk about it, when you look at it, the thing that a lot of people don't talk about when you talk about Oshun, and this is something that is really important, not only is Oshun highly sexualized, not only is she reduced to her just the power of her sex as a woman, she's just, her whole identity is taken away from her so that she only becomes this pulsating vagina, for lack of a better term, because that's how they have Oshun. You know, she is just there to get it, right? but let's talk about this. Oshun is light-skinned with great hair. When we talk about it and when people represent that, and when you go over to Nigeria, they say Oshun is a comely woman. Oshun ain't, you know, guys, she's just like a regular lady. You go and you look at those houses that they have to Oshun, you was like, oh, who's that? They was like, that's Oshun. You're like, oh, what? Up there looking like that with a beard and a mustache, all this stuff going on. You know, so I think it's really, really important for us to do that. So when we talk, because a lot of times people, and especially these young girls, like Corrie, I don't know if you see it as much teaching at Morehouse or Estee, you see it, these young girls thinking that that's all it is to be Oshun. And that's all they are, you know, in order to be that as a woman, an acceptable woman, you have to go with the flow. You have to, if your man does something like that, you have to be sweet and you have to do this and all this other type of stuff. So that's a whole nother show that we can get into. That is an issue.
Which would delve into the influence of patriarchy on our traditions and on
whiteness.
And patriarchy and whiteness. I was trying to say,
and capitalism.
If this was Clubhouse, I could leave peacefully, but I can't do that. So I was trying to get up out of here, and then Nozibele just called me all out. So
okay, on that note, I mean, we can continue this conversation on and on and on, but we'll stop right here. We'll put a pin in it.
That's what I don't want. I don't want y'all to stop because I got to go.
We 20 minutes over, so we're gonna put a pin in this conversation. My sister is a social commentator, journalist, and author, Thandisizwe, Chimurenga, holding it down in Los Angeles. She gets up once a month early to hang out with us. Thank you, my sister.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then my sister,
I get up early. Yes, once a month I get up early.
My sister
actually.
Okunsade, Mawasi, Estee Nena Dillard, who is a queer sexologist. She's a reverend, so she brought that whole theology piece and broke it down to us today. Thank you, sister.
Thank you.
And then Professor Nozibele Kuumba, Antoinette Waithe, and Professor. See, Corey's the easiest one. Corey
That's
Claiborne.
what I said. I got like maybe I'll go down to one name like Prince. I'll be just like I got one name.
Thank you, ladies. We'll see y'all next month.
All right, see you later.
Peace.
You forgot who you be.
My family.
All right, bye.